My fellow plastic crack enthusiast Wolfgang1 Gerard asks, what do you believe was the focal point for the Transformers becoming such a big player in today's contemporary toy market? Pardon me. That's a good question, actually. I was thinking about this not too long ago. What made it the phenomena that it was? And I think, to a certain degree, it's that X factor. It's that ineffable thing that snares the popular consciousness and maintains its hold. There aren't many things that have it, and it's very difficult to express what that is. But there are certain elements that I can pinpoint. I think Transformers was very cleverly marketed, and uniquely marketed as well, because it seems that they tried to cover all the bases with it. Not only do you have toys that are quite unique for the time. I mean, you had the GoBots, but for the most part, the GoBots really don't have quite the same quality as the Transformers toys. The toys themselves were, of course, mechanically interesting because they were not only were they two toys in one, effectively. There was the appeal of attempting to transform them without the instructions and that sort of thing. And then, of course, you had what I consider to be the most interesting element of the Transformers, and that was the fact that they marketed them alongside this quite elaborate mythology, which was expressed both in the cartoon and in the comics, more so in the comics actually than it was in the cartoon, and also in the character bios of the toys themselves. I've never seen another toy line where the characters were so explicitly developed and were so detailed, and also where they were so interesting. The Transformers have some genuinely fascinating individuals amongst them. And they're not just, for the most part, they are not just your standard Saturday morning cartoon stereotypes. You do have those characters, of course, characters such as technically Optimus Prime, who is just the good guy, Megatron, who is just the bad guy. But even those characters have been complexified and made far more than the stereotypes that initially informed them through the extended mythology. But you had characters such as Punch, Counterpunch, the Autobot double spy who was also suffering from nascent multiple personality disorder. Characters such as the Pretender monster Slog, who is an inspired Decepticon artist who's not entirely sold on the Decepticon cause and creates underground art shows of his victims that he carves up on the battlefield. It's that sort of thing, I think, that has allowed Transformers to maintain its appeal. I think people are genuinely fascinated by the characters and the mythology, and this is something that you could see before the phenomena exploded again quite recently, when it was more underground. The place where it was maintained was on the internet, and the amount of fan fiction and fan comics out there and fan art is quite incredible, and some of the quality of it is amazing as well. I mean, a lot of the people who were writing fan fictions and who were creating their own comics, of course, went on to work for Dreamwave and later on for IDW in developing the newer mythologies. So I think it was simply a confabulation of elements, some of which were very deliberate and some of which were not. It's very hard to judge what the populace will take to, what the public will actually latch onto, and Transformers was certainly one. It just snared children's imaginations, for whatever reason. And question 2, what would you have liked to have seen developed or created for the Generation 1 toy line if the Action Masters hadn't killed off customer interest? Ooh, the Action Masters, good God, I mean, what on earth were Hasbro thinking with that? I know, Transformers that don't transform. They're postmodern, you see, it's ironic. Oh, good God. And they weren't even that great toys. I mean, I wouldn't have minded so much if the Action Masters were these wonderfully posable and highly detailed figurines that they made them out to be, but they weren't. What would I have liked to have seen? I would have liked to have seen simply a development in the quality of the toys as the technology developed. If you look at the Beast Wars line, despite its faults, and there are quite a few, it's a line of high invention. Almost every figure in that line is they're trying to experiment with something new, and I think that's very laudable. They don't always succeed. In fact, for the most part, they don't succeed. But what they did do through the Beast Wars line is drive through innovations in toy making that have not only been adopted by later Transformers lines as standard, but also influenced how toys are made in general. So I would have liked to have seen something like the introduction of ball joints and higher posability, reduction of kibble, that sort of thing. I would have also loved to have seen real pretenders. That is, pretenders whose outer shells are not just these solid, immovable bricks that you split in half, but pretenders that could actually move and pose. I think the way they could have done it is in the same way that a toy series called the Warriors of Kerrang operated. And the Warriors of Kerrang were little figures that had slots in their bodies whereby these bits of armour could be attached to them that formed sort of outer shells. That's the way they could have handled the Pretenders. So you had a highly posable inner robot that could transform, and then the Pretender shell that came in pieces and attached to the robot, and maybe even once it was removed could reconfigure into a figure in and of itself. That would have been really cool. I would have loved to have seen that. Because, by and large, I have a soft spot for the Pretenders. Despite their mechanical failings, I have a real soft spot for them. So I would have liked to have seen them become much better than they actually were. I would particularly like to have seen reproductions of iconic characters such as Bludgeon and Thunderwing. Andy3981 asks, do you write fiction? I do indeed. I write a hell of a lot of fiction. I've been writing since I was 15 and sort of developing as a writer since then. I've always written. I used to write stuff when I was a kid, little short stories and whatnot, but I never really considered it seriously until I was 15. When I was 15, I sat down and thought, right, I actually do want to create something meaningful now. I want to see if I can create a coherent story. And of course, I've been developing as a writer since then. What I think defeats a lot of people who sit down to write is that, like most things, it's not as easy as you first assume. I think one of the things that spurs a lot of writers on, certainly spurred me on, is when you read someone who is published and who is popular but is genuinely awful, someone like Dean Koontz, and you think, I can do better than this. And I am going to do better than this. And then you actually sit down to do it, and you find that it's actually very, very difficult. What I found is that it requires the willingness to fail more than anything, and the ability to say, fine, that hasn't worked, I will move on, I will not keep flogging a dead horse. And also not to get self-recriminatory about it, to regard each failure as a learning curve. Right, that didn't work, why didn't it work? What I found when I was at university, a lot of the people who claim they wanted to be writers, is that they would give up very easily when they realised that they were not going to be the next Stephen King or the next J.K. Rowling or whatever. And also they didn't write regularly, they would only write for whatever classes we would attend, which just defeated me utterly. I had more trouble writing for the classes personally because I was usually busy with my own projects or whatever. And so most of them actually gave up. And I think that's how you separate the wheat from the chaff, I suppose. Those who have some genuine passion and enthusiasm for writing will continue regardless.